Hi, everybody. This is Jay Carter back again with the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing attorney Art Horne, who, amongst a lot of rappers that he represents, that includes Yo Gotti and a couple of other rappers that you may have heard of. Today, we're going to be talking about his journey, but we'll also be talking about the state of rap lyrics and the fact that lyrics are now being used against defendants. Art, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jay Carter. Good to see you again.
Yes. So for just a little background, I actually met Attorney Horne at the National Bar Association's annual conference. They have award ceremony. They have for various attorneys across the nation. So it was a pleasure meeting him in person. And so I told him he had to be on my podcast when I met him.
She was slaying that dress.
Right. Me and my business partner came to slay at the National Bar. So definitely.
They were slaying it.
So I want to start off with legal hot topics, because before I get into your journey of why you became a Black attorney, I would love to just first start off with, hot topics that are happening around the country and make all my guests give me their feedback. So let's start off with, Courtney Clenny. So for the audience, if you haven't heard of Courtney Clenny, she is a OnlyFans model, very big on OnlyFans. She is, blonde hair, blue eyes, epitome of, OnlyFans model. And she was dating a Black guy. He's actually of African descent. I believe his family is of African descent. And there was a report. She basically called the police after an altercation between the two of them. And essentially they found him dead in the apartment with a knife in him. And there were no arrests of her. She was the only person there. So it wasn't like there was anybody else there. So she was the only person there. There were no arrests, there were no charges. Instead, they put her into a mental hold because clearly, there was a breakdown and something had happened. Now, when she was released from the hold, a lot of the people in the community, especially the Black community, were split about, whether there should be support of her being charged of clearly murdering this guy. Because again, she was the only person present at the time of the murder, because of his past comments about not dating Black women, because he was very vocal about that on social media. Some people in the Black community didn't feel sorry for him. Setting that aside for just a moment, even if he had derogatory comments against Black women, I don't think it's right, that, he's murdered, and clearly the person that, that was present, the only person present during this murder, is not at least looked into. And so the other half of the Black community was like, okay, regardless of what he said, this needs to be looked into. And for several months, she went on about her life, posting on social media as if nothing had happened. And she's now been finally charged with second-degree murder. And there has also been some footage released of that night of them actually fighting in the elevator, and it appears that she is the aggressor. So what are your, without obviously, knowing too much about the case, what are your thoughts about someone going that long without being charged and literally being the only one present with the weapon at the scene? What are your thoughts on that, on why it would happen that way?
I mean, I think what you see, Jay Carter, is that there are still inequities in our system. Years ago, I represented a Black woman by the name of Monique Johnson. Monique was a deputy jailer, had dated a guy who was an OCU officer. He was abusive, he was controlling. Long story short, she ends up killing him, putting him in the trunk of his car and driving it and leaving it next to a dumpster in July in Memphis heat. They used every possible resource they could to find her and arrest her within days of his death. I think that the factual scenario that you gave us And the reason, and seeing that it took them
4 months.
4 months to charge this woman. They were methodical in the way that they went about it. They probably looked at evidence. They probably didn't make a rush to judgment. And it's really sad because in most cases, as it pertains to African Americans and people of brown and Black descent, we see a rush to judgment. We don't see the treatment being the same. We don't see the treatment being a methodical review of the evidence before we charge this person. We'll charge them and let them sit in jail for 3 or 4 years. And if they're not guilty, then the system will take care of it. So that is sort of the first thought that I have when you talk about those facts. Had this been a Black woman,
I mean, murder weapon in his chest. I mean, she was
the
only person there. And
right.
Here's the thing. And I guess this is just my only follow-up question. Obviously I'm not Florida licensed, but I know for the most part, murder is murder wherever. They're only charging her with second degree murder. So, first degree typically is if it was like planned, there was some sort of premeditation, right? And because there was clearly a fight, I'm sure part of that footage is what they use in the consideration that, again, maybe it wasn't a plan. Maybe there was like some sort of heat of passion. Talk to us more about second degree murder.
But I would disagree. I would say if there's footage prior to the murder, if there's footage of her being the aggressor, right, and being aggressive with him on the elevator, and then later killing him.
Okay.
Reverse the role. If he were the male in this situation, a Black man, on the elevator, being aggressive and being the primary aggressor with this white woman.
Right.
And then found in her home, stabbed her to death, killed her. Do you think he would have been given the grace to, let's go make sure his mental illness is okay. Let's go make sure his mindset is okay. No, he would have been walking out of that apartment in handcuffs, charged with first degree murder. Now, later on, if they looked at the facts and they wanted to adjust it,
right,
then that's what they would have done. So again, I mean, we've come a long way. It's 2022, but we still have major inequities in our system. And this is just a prime example. Again, I mean, the case in Georgia with Aubrey, what's
Ahmaud Arbery?
Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, right? Like, they shoot this man and they hunt him down, shoot him in cold blood. And
they could have easily said, we think something is suspicious, called 911 and went about their business. But it was clear that they weren't in fear of their life because they were literally hunting him down like an animal. Right. And it came out on the stand that, you're claiming that what you did was in self-defense, but how's it in self-defense when you are the aggressor? So I hear what you're saying. In this case, pretty sure you had an opportunity to leave the apartment, unless he locked the door. And again, we don't have footage of that, but if there was an opportunity for you to leave, you could have left. And like you said, the elevator footage actually, to your point, actually goes against probably the second degree charge.
Second degree murder, correct. I mean, but I think historically what you see is women do get a bit of a pass when it relates to it. Just in my experience, if I have a female client who loses it, and I've represented several women who have been charged with first degree murder and have killed their spouses, and I've been very successful at getting good verdicts. What I've seen from juries is they're a little more understanding if a woman loses her cool versus a man who we're supposed
to. Especially if there's a history of domestic violence, because she's already said that. So before her charges, she made it seem like whatever was happening, it was kind of like self-defense, that she was this domestic violence victim. I mean, she did a really good job early on putting that narrative out there. So perhaps that's also why they decided to just go ahead and move forward with the second degree.
Yeah, and I mean, as her lawyer, all relationships at some point, if they're to that point where they're fighting, they're volatile, right? And so they're going to be issues. And so I think in today's society, when we hear those words, domestic violence or history of domestic violence, the defense is already putting out sort of their theory of this case, that this man was abusive and she feared for her life and she defended herself if she was in her home, obviously, or if she was in his home, she didn't feel like she could get away, so she did what she had to do. And there's really no one else to rebut.
Because they're the only two people. Unfortunately, it's like her word against his. And like you said, unfortunately, he can't speak for himself. So we can only go on what she said, you know, like you said, the elevator footage. And like you said, they took their time to gather what they could gather before charging her. But I do think it's really interesting that you made the point that, you know, if the roles were reversed and he did this to her, or if this was a Black woman, I just don't know if they would have let her go to a mental hold to calm down. I don't think they would have waited months to arrest her. Like, I don't think that the same treatment would have been given. And that goes to the racial equity thing that you mentioned. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Moving on to our second hot topic, we have Nicole Lorraine Linton, who is a 37-year-old nurse in California, LA County, I believe in the La Brea area in California, went through an intersection, allegedly purposely. She went through so far there's no evidence that like her brakes gave out or something like that. But she purposely went through the light in a suicide attempt over a breakup. And so that was the initial news that we got, and that 6 people had been killed, including a woman who was pregnant and her toddler. So, it's an awful case of, someone trying to self-harm and involving others. So many people are like, well, why couldn't she just go on a tree or go off a cliff? Like, why go through an intersection and involve so many people? That's probably everyone's first thought, and that's been what has been echoed the most. But from a legal perspective, for just a moment, I wanted to talk to you about her charges. So they are actually charging her with, let me get this right, 6 counts of murder, obviously, and then 5 counts of vehicular manslaughter. So why charge her with both? I don't understand that. If you can explain that to our audience.
Well, I mean, I think one, the intent was there to commit harm. If she had intent to commit harm and then it turned out to be a murder, obviously, I think that's where the murder charges come from. Vehicular homicide is very clear. A killing occurred. It happened in the vehicle with her acting recklessly. So that would be sort of more of the obvious one. I think the murder is more of a stretch, but I think they probably wanted to stack the charges up based on the unfortunate situation and the heinousness of the facts and the crime. But again, it goes back to what we talked about in the other case. One, you give somebody some grace when there's mental illness, quote unquote.
And by the way, for the audience that looking, she is a Black woman. So her first case involved a white woman. Second case involves a Black woman. And as you can see, they're stacking the charges, and obviously they did it right away. So
she wasn't allowed to go get her, treated, and she wasn't given the same grace as the woman in the first case. And again, the laws in California or in LA are very different. I've handled cases out there, but we still have major inequities in our system.
But tell us again, though. I understand you're saying why the vehicular manslaughter, that goes without saying, someone died in a vehicle. Clearly she was being reckless. How can they charge her with murder? Because I know she intended to kill herself, but clearly I don't think she was thinking, let me kill these 6 people. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how are they charging her also with murder?
I think under the theory of negligent homicide, was it foreseeable that her negligent behavior would cause somebody to be harmed or murdered? And so I think that's a reach, but I think that's one of the theories they're proceeding on, probably because of the public outrage.
I see.
Because vehicular homicide, I know here in Shelby County only carries 4 to 8 years.
Right.
So, and I'm not sure what the statute is in LA, but
But clearly murder is going to
it's
be
not
life.
life.
It'll be
Right.
life. Yeah. So
Right.
it's almost like because it's so extreme, let's also add these murder charges to ensure that she just doesn't get, a couple of years. Now, one fact I didn't mention in the case, which I don't know how she still has a driver's license, supposedly it came out in the record that she already had 13 other accidents. Now, again, they may not have been at this level, but she clearly has a driving issue. And again, I don't know if any of those other accidents were tips at suicide. I guess
Right.
that will come out later. But yeah, so that is just kind of like icing on the cake of like, why was this woman even driving? Clearly she, suffered from mental illness, and she just didn't get the help that she, even with her being a medical professional, she's a nurse.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's unfortunate all around that because of the outcry, yeah, they're probably going to try to get at least one of those murder charges to stick so that she will spend the rest of her life in jail. And so, yeah, it should be interesting to see how this continues to play out. But just talking to you in this order of cases, it just didn't even dawn on me like, oh yeah, there's, different treatment for different,
Right.
different types of people.
And,
I didn't even think about that before I spoke to you today. So.
And vehicular homicide is a lesser offense than second degree murder, right? A crime, a violent crime versus. I mean, I guess they could say that her crime was somewhat violent, driving recklessly into an intersection. But I mean, one was clearly intentional, and two, I think the thing that we keep coming back to is when your skin color looks a certain way. You're given the grace of the mental illness card. Even we saw that in the case with the young man that went to, was it the Walmart?
Mm-hmm.
He
I think it's
went and shot and killed the Black folks.
Oh yeah, they just casually walked about, made sure he was okay. I think they even
Right.
stopped to get him a sandwich because he was
Right.
hungry.
And I mean, let me.
I mean, you don't want to laugh, but it's so ridiculous.
Right.
It's so ridiculous when you say
You already know what's gonna happen. The beatdown will happen. Right? Like the beatdown's coming.
But yeah, for them to casually make sure he was okay, make sure he got something to eat. I mean, even when you say it out loud, it just sounds so ridiculous. When if we commit just, I think what was it with George Floyd alleged? I mean, it ended up not being a counterfeit bill, but it was supposedly a counterfeit bill, and all that happened to him over just a simple counterfeit bill, and someone literally shoots up a whole place. And they're casually walked out, and they make sure that they go. I believe they took him to like a McDonald's or something to make sure he got.
Yeah, the treatment is desperate in that, I mean, many of the killings of African Americans, particularly African American males, they don't even have a weapon.
I know.
They don't even have a weapon, right? Like we're not even talking about somebody with a weapon. And you just see the treatment and how different it is.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they want, and some states have made an effort. I won't say no state has made an effort, but this is why so many states are trying to make efforts to retrain their police officers and reconsider who they even let on the force. Because if there is that underlying bias, if you don't have that inclusion and diversity training and things like that, there's just always going to be this underlying assumption and bias. When you come on the scene, your first indication of, well, who is it? Is it a woman? Is it a man? Right. Are they white? Are they not white? It's like in their minds, like a quick computer, and that allows them to decide their disposition towards you, even from the beginning. I mean, anytime I'm around an officer and there's just even a minor situation, whatever the case may be, I know people get annoyed, but I pull my lawyer card for everything. Okay. I pull it out. I'm like, okay, I just want to let you know I'm also an officer in law. I'm an attorney here. Like when I tell you that is the first thing I say, and I say it because I want them to immediately give me a different level of respect. And I'm not saying that's going to always work, but typically if they know I'm a lawyer, they talk to me differently. They handle the situation a little differently. And it's sad that I have to pull my lawyer card to be treated fairly. But I quite often do it. Of course, my family laughs at me. They're like, "Oh Lord, here she goes. She's pulling her lawyer card." But it's true.
But the problem with that is you shouldn't have to do that.
I know.
I mean,
I know.
I had a client who literally, her daughter was selling weed out of their home in one of the suburbs. The police officers were surveilling the house. They followed her and her mom one day. They pulled them over for not using the
Turn signal.
turn signal.
Hmm.
And the woman and her daughter, who were white, proceed to get out of the car. The daughter's videotaping. The mother gets in the officer's face and is cussing him out, basically spitting on him, and he's apologizing. Okay, and then they call me and they say, "Do you think we have a case?" Now, in my mind, I'm thinking all the time, like, I wonder, even as a lawyer, if I would have pulled some that nonsense. I mean, we already know what would happen. So again, I mean, they're just I think, and I talked to I'm friends. A lot of my buddies are officers. I've represented some of them in the past, and I said, what do you guys think it is? And I think a lot of times, even with some of the Black officers, there's an underlying fear of Black men in this country.
Yeah.
And you have people that are walking around with badges and guns who are supposed to serve and protect us, who are afraid of Black men.
They're afraid.
And I had a personal situation where I was leaving the gym. My daughter was driving. She just got a permit. I'm sweaty. I got my hoodie on. My tags, I forgot to get new tags. They were expired. No, I had new tags. I just had to put the new license plate on. Officer pulls us over, comes up to the back window and starts to put his hand on his gun. And I said, "Sir," I roll the window down. I said, "Sir, this is not that."
Yeah, that's not.
Why are you stopping me? You're stopping me over a tag, and you want to walk up and ask me to roll the back window down over
A tag. Yeah.
Like, stop this. Like, stop. Because I have a hoodie on. I mean, I'm hot. I'm sweaty. I got my hoodie on.
Right, but because you're a Black man, and you're look, you're a tall Black man on top of that. Like, it's amazing. Certain features up the ante in terms of them feeling threatened. It's not like you're a petite Black man. You're tall, you know. So again, it's almost like a computer goes off and they're like, okay, he's this, and that. Let's be ready, right? Let's be ready to be on the defense, because 9 times out of 10, he can maybe do something to us. And like you said, that is the underlining thing with all these cases, which I think is a great transition to my final hype topic. Another Black defendant woman, Brittany Griner, who is not being charged in the US, but obviously being charged in Russia, one of the worst times where we're clearly, you know, in the middle of a conflict with Ukraine and everything like that. But setting aside the conflict aside, you know, she's been arrested. It's being said that essentially she's being used as a political pawn because of what's happening. As you know, she was charged with not just, you know, possession, but they tried to add that she was actually trying to even smuggle, which is like a whole nother level of charges. And essentially her lawyers did try to present evidence that, you know, there wasn't even that much in the vape pen. So clearly that's not smuggling, and that she acknowledges that she accidentally put it in her bag. And so she pled guilty on that, but she thought that she would just be released or get lesser time because it was clearly not enough evidence to show that she even had the amount required for their whole smuggling legislation over there. But for whatever reason, they threw out all that evidence that was presented, and they just gave her a guilty charge across the board. And now she's facing up to 9.5 years, I believe, in prison over there. And so she's currently in the middle of her appeal. And my question to you is, which I already know the answer, if this was LeBron James, okay, let's say LeBron James accidentally, or even maybe purposely, but let's just give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. Accidentally carried a vape pen, and this was right before everything happened with the conflict, and he was arrested. Do you think, A, he would still be over there, even pending any charges, but B, even if they decided to charge him and everything, do you think these cases would have been handled the same way?
Well, first of all, Brittany Griner is not LeBron James.
I know, but two American basketball players, I'm just saying, two
I mean,
American bad, one good and bad, one.
I mean, in the mind of many people, he's the GOAT. Number one, he wouldn't have been over there with a vape pen. All right.
But let's just say he accidentally brought it.
Well, I'm gonna touch on some subjects. One, you can't be playing around in some of these foreign countries. We are very lax about vape pens and marijuana use. But if you go to South America, you go to Cartagena, Colombia, if they see you in the street, you know, you're gonna get accosted and arrested, and they're gonna take whatever cash you have to let you go. Some of these places in Mexico are the same way. So I think as Americans, we feel a certain entitlement, a certain level of entitlement when we go to foreign countries. In the case of Brittany Griner, I mean, she's political bait, let's be honest. They want
two people, not one, in exchange for her.
They want this arms dealer. I can't remember his name, but
they call him the death agent or something. So he has a terrible name. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Putin's guy. Like, and it's gonna happen. Okay, let's be real.
So you do think it's gonna happen?
All of the appeals and all that is just for show, and they're just trying to show that they're giving her a fair day in court. But we already know the fix is in. It's been in, and she's political bait. The larger issue that I speak to people about when they ask me about this is we need sweeping reform in the United States, because there are many people that are still in prison, in federal prisons, on marijuana cases.
Right here in the United States.
Right here in the US, right? And in Shelby County, I think they have taken a better approach to not prosecuting misdemeanor amounts of marijuana, even small felony amounts of marijuana. So I think that as society, as we evolve, I think the approach to marijuana is being taken a lot differently, but it still needs to happen across the board. I know it's happening in some of the larger cities that don't have marijuana legislation statewide, but I think the federal government needs to just step in and say, hey, look.
Just across the board, this is the rule no matter what state you're in, instead of having all this state to state different treatment. For sure.
I mean, I think that the science is there on marijuana. I think, you know.
And at one point they treated alcohol the same way. There was a whole, you know, era where you weren't allowed to. Eventually, you know, they decided, okay, well, you know, the consumption level, you know, and things like that, you know, they did the science on it and they decided, okay, it should no longer be illegal. So yeah, I mean, clearly we're definitely gonna, we're not in the perfect place, but we're clearly in a much better place than where we were with marijuana maybe years ago. So we're moving, but you're right. I think with any law, it's just like even how they treated COVID. If you don't have a federal rule where every state follows the same rules, it's not going to really work. It has to be everybody is following the same rule. But, you know, that's a whole constitutional issue where they feel like, you know, certain things states should decide. So,
well, but I was going to change your analogy. If Sue Bird, okay, who was a former WNBA player, all-star player, who happens to be white, was in the same position with Brittany Griner, we find her in the same. Would we find the U.S. government acting as slowly as it has in that case? I think that's the question, right?
She was a white woman,
right? Whose sexual orientation is not, you know,
right? Because they said that's another level of it too. It's not that she's Black, she's a woman, but she's also LGBTQ. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's so many layers of bias that's going on with her. It's like an onion; you could peel it for days. I'm praying for her. You know, I think they're being a little vigilant on how they treat her. You know, they don't want to overly do anything crazy to her while she's in the jail over there, because they want to be able to switch her without any complications. But just being over there since whenever, January or February, and not knowing your fate, and now you have your fate, which is it's 9 years, right? Unless they switch you, because like you said, an appeal most likely it's just a procedural thing. It's not going to be successful. I don't know. Is the government really willing to give up this deaf guy plus another guy? Because supposedly they want two, not one, just for Brittany. Maybe they'll just do it just because there is so much pressure. I don't know. And my thing is, if they're going to do it, my final question to you is, if it's for sure they're going to do it, some sort of switch, what's taking them so long? They could just do it right now, right?
Well, and I hate to say this because I'm really not a fan, but I think if Donald Trump was still in office,
He probably would have went ahead and yeah, I agree with you. That
he
is something I agree. He wouldn't have allowed her. Yeah, I agree.
got ASAP Rocky back within, I mean,
Yeah, you're
immediately
right.
with a phone call, and so you know,
Like you said, it just depends on who's in charge at the time, what the negotiation looks like. Like you said, there's so many layers into why decisions are made and how quickly. Like you said, even decisions made, they're going to go ahead and trade the fact that it's taking so long. So we're keeping Brittany and her family in prayers. And the WNBA and a lot of celebrity advocates are still being very vocal to continue to put that pressure out there so that the switch is made quickly. Because as you stated before, and I agree with you, I don't think an appeal will be successful. I think it's procedural at this point. So switching gears to why we're actually here today. Thank you for playing our round of hot topics. Yes. Why we're here today is not only to just get your perspective about what's going on legally in this country, but to also just ask about who you are and what is, what has been your journey being a Black attorney here in the US. So my first question is, essentially, who were you before you were Art Horne, the attorney? Who were you before that? So if you weren't an attorney before that, who were you? Who were you in high school? Like, who were you before you? Like, I mean, I'm assuming, you were in college, right before, let's take us back to right before you decided you were going to attend law school. Who were you? Who was Art Horne?
well, a lot of people, I've probably gained a lot of weight since college and undergrad and high school, but when I went to college, I went to college on a partial golf scholarship and partial academic scholarship. I'm a former Jackie Robinson scholar. I know Rachel Robinson and the family really well through that foundation. They do great work. They continue to do great work. And I was blessed to play golf at Eastern Michigan University, where I was the first African-American ever playing the Mid-American Conference. And I applaud my school because they now have another young African-American. He's the second African-American to play in the Mid-American Conference, playing for Eastern Michigan University. And so, in a sense, I like to say that I was a trailblazer in my own right. Because I had a lot of hurdles playing the game of golf, being a predominantly white sport. You've seen and heard from people like Charlie Sifford, Lee Elder, and all the great guys that came before us, including Tiger Woods, and sort of the hurdles that we faced back then playing golf in this country prior to the PGA Tour taking a different stance on country clubs that discriminated and things of that nature. So that's where sort of my journey started. I pledged one of the greatest fraternities in the world, Kappa Alpha Psi.
Oh Lord, here we go. Everybody always starts their fraternity sorority with that statement. Okay, Kappa, you're Kappa. Okay.
I was president of the Delta Nu chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, and that's where I began my leadership. I was also captain of the golf team, and I took great pride in that. And eventually, when I graduated, I tried to play professional golf for a few years, and I made the decision that I wasn't going to be Tiger Woods, and I had to figure out kind of what I was going to do with my life going forward. My dad and granddad were doctors here in Memphis. They left a great name and a great legacy. I'm Arthur Horne III. They served this community for many years and did a great job. My grandfather was actually the last doctor in Memphis to do house calls and deliver babies at home. And he delivered his last home birth was in 1975. So I come from a great legacy. And after, a lot of thought, I decided that I was going to pursue law school. And
So,
so
but why, so why, I mean, your father and your grandfather, why attorney Horne instead of Dr. Horne? Why did you do law over medicine?
my grandfather was a huge influence in my life, probably the greatest influence in my life. And he and I, we went back and forth, and he just thought that medicine was changing so much, and that law was such a diverse field, because he would always say, you can have a law degree, you can go into business, you can be an agent, you can get into politics, you can do a myriad of things. And so, and I think my grandfather was truly intrigued by the law. And so he convinced my sister and I both to go to law school. And so that's sort of started my journey to becoming a lawyer. And I didn't have a traditional sort of track. I thought that I was going to be a corporate lawyer. I took all sort of business related classes. And when I graduated, I went to work for a big firm here in town, and I was a transactional lawyer for almost 2 years. I was miserable. I don't think that my personality really fit being a transactional lawyer. I'm outgoing. I love people. And so I had an opportunity to go to another firm and start doing litigation. And I loved it. I loved it. And that's sort of where my love and passion for becoming a trial lawyer began. And because I was very close to leaving the practice of law, I did not enjoy being a transactional lawyer. During that period of time, though, I met a young man named Yo Gotti, of Mario Mims, and he was an aspiring artist and rapper. We were introduced. At the time, I was doing a little bit of entertainment law, and I was primarily representing all of the producers and artists in Memphis. And he and I just bonded immediately, and I became his lawyer. And over the years, I've been his lawyer, I've been his advisor, I've been his friend, and I've been there and watching him build this CMG empire with Moneybag Yo, with Big 30, with Black Youngster. And I think because of my relationship with Gotti and the things that I was able to accomplish with him and help him with and advise him in situations, I gained the trust of him and all of these other guys. And so I sort of became their guy. So I've been blessed to be able to interact with a lot of the younger artists. Gotti's 40 now, so he would kind of be an older head. But as the young guys come through, they still respect me and look up to me, and they trust me. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the biggest thing for them is, having somebody that they really trust. And so I built that trust. And I think my role has been sort of a dual role in that a lot of the young men that I come in contact with, they've never had a positive Black male influence in their life, and somebody that they trust, and somebody that can help them in business and help them just in life. Mm-hmm. And so I've been blessed to have the opportunity to bridge those relationships and have relationships with, these guys, and have these friendships with them as well.
So I just want to rewind a little bit. You talked about your transition from obviously being a transactional attorney, big law, probably making lots of money, but being miserable, which is a common theme. And that's a lot, some people end up doing it for a while and they still love it because, transactional is what they love. But a lot of people don't enjoy it, right? So you realize you like to be a litigator. You love being a trial lawyer. In addition to just being miserable because you just didn't like the work. We've already talked a lot about equity, right? Amongst how defendants are treated. How were you treated as a Black male attorney, probably in a majority, I'm assuming, white setting? Did you ever, in your experiences there, just feel like, you didn't belong? And if not there, maybe even in law school, were you potentially were there ever any moments where you felt like this is going to be hard because I'm essentially the only one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, even, I mean, I think being an African American and growing up from the time that I was 5, I played other sports. I played baseball and basketball, but I really excelled at golf. And so I think being a lot of times the only one, going to a country club and having to change in the parking lot when the other kids could go inside and change in the clubhouse, having to not being able to go in the bar and grill after the tournament was over, and having to be in the parking lot with my dad and my mom. Those type of experiences for a young person were very impactful, but I think they helped me in my maturation into law and to working in a large firm. I did experience those inequities. I was touted as sort of the guy that could come in and bring all the business. But I was also not given the good work. I had to essentially generate my own business as a new lawyer, which is
rare.
When you think about it, it's like, really? I mean, y'all don't have any skill sets, but y'all want me to come in and make y'all money to justify why I should be here, but you don't want to teach me anything. And so essentially, I think that's why you see a lot of great, talented lawyers leave big firms and go off on their own and do their own thing, because our talents aren't, we're touted for, diversity. Look what we have, or what they can bring this group, instead of like truly what our skill sets are. And it took me a while to really embrace and know that, like, one, I belonged to this fraternity of trial lawyers, and two, that I was good at what I did. So a lot of the lawyers that I see now that I used to work with, my success is sort of what I stand on, right? Like I don't have to brag. I don't have to boast. They read about me in the newspaper. They see me on the news. They see the cases that I've handled, and I just let that speak for itself. But it hasn't been easy, and I don't think a lot has changed from talking to a lot of the younger lawyers that are coming out of law school, which is why I personally set up a scholarship at the law school here and an internship.
And which law school is that?
The University of Memphis.
Okay.
And every summer I hire my scholarship recipient and try to train them and help them and mentor them. And I've been doing it for, this is the 6th year. And
so if you're listening and you're in Memphis and you go to the school, look out for our scholarship.
Horne Diversity Scholarship.
Okay, listen out, look out for that. Well, it's funny because you answered my next question. Because the legal profession, we're still less than 5% of all U.S. attorneys are Black, which sometimes it's hard for me to wrap around. But I'm like, I know so many Black lawyers, but when you look at the, you're like, are y'all sure that number is right? But I think it's just because of the community, the networks I've created. That's why I know so many. If I didn't go out of my way to create communities, go into networks where Black attorneys existed, I probably would feel it a little bit more that there just not that many of us. So that was going to be my next question. What are things that we can do, existing Black lawyers, people in law firms, what can we do to increase that number past 5%, under 5%? Because it's actually been that way for several years, probably the last, 20 years. Like the number, it doesn't change. So I think, like you said, actually training young lawyers, offering scholarships, offering network opportunities, again, letting people know, to the point of what your grandfather said, you can do a lot with a law degree, making law cool, making it something attractive. I think that is how you increase it. My niece is part of Generation Z, which, I'm sorry, I cannot stay in Generation Z. They're very entitled. They want everything right now. They all want to be entrepreneurs. Nobody wants to go to school. Nobody wants to do anything, and God bless their souls. But I'm like, listen, everybody doesn't necessarily have to be, like you said, a lawyer, doctor, engineer, teacher, some of these traditional professions, but we need somebody to be in these professions. Everybody doesn't have to do it, but somebody, if we don't have people, like you said, to replace you, to replace me eventually, yeah, that's why that number does it. People are going into other professions. So I concur. I think we should just continue to do things to make law attractive to the next generation of Black students, college students coming up, so that we see changes in that number.
No, I think the visibility, like you said, is important. I obviously to market yourself, you have to post on Instagram and social media platforms, and I try to do that. And I, when I have three teenage daughters, and when their friends come around, I try to spend time with them and talk to them. And like you said, law is a hard sell because it's a hard grind.
Yeah, because it's not just school. It's like college, law school. Then you have to take the bar. Then you have to train your profession. I mean, it's not probably as long as med school. Med school to me still has it hands down in terms of how many years. But some people are like, I don't see myself doing anything past college. I'm just trying to get through college. And you want me to do, 3 more years of school. You want me to, sometimes take multiple bars depending on what you're trying to do. It's a hard sell. You're right. It's a hard sell. But I think
the grind is not sexy.
Right.
And that's the first thing that my interns, they learn. They're like, oh, you do real work, Mr. Horne. You don't show up in style. I'm like, yeah, this is right. It, right? Yeah. And so it's not a sexy grind at all. I mean, and even when you represent high profile clients, right?
Right, which can be exciting. I mean,
that's exciting, but it's that's the real work. I might have to get up out of bed at midnight and go meet somebody and have a conversation face to face. That's not sexy either.
Well, that's a good transition to my next question. I'm sure you're aware of what's going on in Fulton County, Georgia. DA Fannie Willis pled, and she has come down with several indictments, including obviously why am I forgetting his name? Young Gunner, and then there's one other. Young Thug, right. So I know they're just two of many people, right? And of course, their names are going to be what's in the news because they're famous. Other people probably don't care about, but they're two of many people she's indicted. And supposedly in the next couple of weeks, she's already warned that she's coming after some other people. Are any of your clients afraid, or even if not your clients, your clients that maybe have colleagues that live in Georgia, are they afraid that they could be targets because it appears that she is not letting up?
No.
One
of the things that Gotti is one of the smartest businessmen that I've ever met that doesn't have a degree. Early on, we sat down after he had been implicated in a couple of federal matters, which we were later able to get him cleared out of it. Okay. We sat down and we talked about how to distance yourself from situations. And one of the things that I love about him is, one, social platforms, we don't post on social platforms. We don't beef on social platforms. We don't put certain things on social platforms. The second thing was he had to learn how to separate himself from the streets, essentially, while maintaining a presence in the streets. And that's a very fine line, and it's very difficult. And some of the associates, I'll put it to you this way. You can't dibble and dabble. Because under the RICO statute and under the conspiracy laws, if you're a small spoke in that wheel, right? If you got this wheel and you're a little spoke, but you in that wheel, you part of that conspiracy. And guess what else? They want the big fish. They don't want the little fish. And so if you still running around with these same guys that you grew up with, and you still giving them money, and you know what they're doing, and they're dibbling and dabbling, and they're buying drugs, or they're doing this, or they're doing that, and you're turning a blind eye to it, if they can put you in that spoke or that wheel, they're going to. And I think that's what you're seeing with Young Thug and Gunner.
So
And,
that was going to be my question. I mean, essentially, people say, well, how is she really you don't have to do that much to tie them necessarily in RICO cases. As long as you can show there's some connection to the conspiracy or there was some knowledge, it doesn't take a lot to tie someone to a RICO case. And I think what you said is very important. Once you become famous and you're making money and you're becoming successful, yeah, at some level your brand has to be tied to the street because you're still a rapper and you're not turning your back on where you're from. But it has to be a thin line between still embracing where you're from and not really being involved. And I think that, unfortunately, Young Thug and Gunna, maybe that's where they're falling short. They were still at some level still associated with people that were committing these crimes, and they may get attached, like you said, in these RICO charges, even if it is something very surface. It doesn't have to be something really deep, which I think is very frightening. But the point that I wanted to just quickly discuss with you, it's one thing to have text messages, right? Or other types of evidence, maybe witness testimony. There are all sorts of different types of evidence you can present on any sort of criminal case. It's one thing to have those things, but it just seems like a big part of her case are the lyrics. A part of me feels like she should have just left that out because I just feel like it's making it so controversial that she's really pushing this lyrics thing. I think this is my thought process. If you have all the other evidence, like you said, it doesn't take much to really tie someone to a RICO. Why bring this lyric foolishness into this? Why is she so pressed to let that be part of her headlining evidence? Why does she think that's a benefit?
so when you ask that question, I'm a father. I have daughters that are teenagers that listen to hip hop music.
Right.
I love hip hop music, but if I'm looking at it with my father hat on, I understand if she's upset about some of the rap lyrics that are being fed to our kids,
Okay.
children these days.
Okay.
And it's an all out attack on the type of hip hop music that is being forced down our children's throats, essentially. I mean, you think about some of the songs that we like. I mean, we like hip hop, Throw Babies, whatever, I mean, it's you get it.
And to be fair, hip hop is not always that way. It's definitely evolved into something different. And so she's looking at kind of the new rap, the new hip hop that specifically says, I want to go kill this person. My lawyer actually helped me beat this case and I know I'm guilty. I mean, you're putting things in your lyrics where, playing devil's advocate, you could just be being creative. You could have been just being creative. Right.
I've been in a few rap songs. I get cool points from my kids because I've been in some couple of rap songs. But it's interesting that you bring this topic up because one of the artists that I work with, right after this happened, one of his close friends had been killed, and he wanted to release this song that was very dear to him, and it was a story, and it was a story about someone close to him being killed, and it was also talked about the repercussions and the retaliation and things like that. But it was a story. It wasn't real. It hadn't happened. But we had to sit down with the label. We had to sit down with him. We had to sit down with his manager, review the lyrics, and have a serious conversation about, now, if you get in trouble or if something happens after the song comes out, there could be some negative repercussions that could come back to bite you. And I think that is also, I really applauded the label. I don't think at first it was well received or well taken by he and his manager, just to be responsible. Because again, a lot of times our clients are these young guys who aren't educated, that come from the streets, and they depend on people like me and people like the label to protect them.
But to play devil's advocate in terms of creative expression and First Amendment and all of that, right? Could someone just be making up a story to make their song sound a certain way and maybe they didn't really do it?
Oh, absolutely. They do it all. 99% of what you hear on the radio is fiction.
Well, I get, okay, so you conceded to that point. So since you're conceding to the point that a lot of times it's just fiction, it's just to create a certain narrative in a song, she must also know this. So I don't know. I guess if I'm a prosecutor, I'm going to go with my strongest evidence and I'm just going to sit on that. I'm not going to add in lyrics that could easily be argued, right? That, oh, it's not real. It's just, creative expression. I don't know. I just feel like if the audience is listening regarding rap lyrics, the state of rap lyrics, there are two things happening. New York on the state level has already passed something saying that lyrics obviously can't be used against defendants unless, there's some other evidence that clearly shows that the lyrics clearly tie to what happened. And then on a federal level, they're also trying to do it where all states would have to abide by this. Again, I don't think it will necessarily pass on a federal level, but I do think state by state, they can probably get this passed. So, Georgia is a very popular place for rappers. And I definitely think because of what is happening to the rappers in this particular case, that Georgia probably will be next. Again, I don't know who the legislators are, but I think that this state probably will be the next state to try to pass something on a state level if the federal level it's not passed. I mean, what are your thoughts about maybe just having it nationwide that lyrics shouldn't be used against defendants?
I mean, I love the idea. I don't know if we will ever see that, but I do love the idea, and I think it. From a defense lawyer standpoint, it makes it difficult when you do have a client that is potentially facing charges and you got a judge who's probably 50 years plus and doesn't understand hip hop, doesn't understand the music, doesn't understand where it comes from, and is only looking at it from a surface perspective.
Right.
So fortunately here in Shelby County we've got some a very diverse bench of judges, and so I don't think it would have gone over the same way with the majority of our judges as it did in the case in Georgia.
Right. Well, we're going to stay tuned to that particular case. Like I said, it's not going to be over anytime soon. Obviously like you said, you had to sit your clients down and said, these are the things we're going to do, we're not going to do, because just in case something happens in the future. And like I said, I wish more young rappers had the benefit, like you said, of not just having an attorney to represent them on their legal issues after the fact, right? But has some has some foresight as to, from a business perspective and a legal perspective, some things that they should be protecting themselves against. Two other cases I just want to get your quick feedback on because they're happening now, and it actually has to do with lyrics. So one is obviously, one has to do with lyrics and one doesn't have to do with lyrics, but one has to do with the rappers. So ASAP Rocky has been officially charged in an incident in California where supposedly, a gun was pulled out on someone where he was walking in California. So they've decided, I know they arrested him some time ago, but they're actually moving forward with the charges. I know it's reasonable doubt in this country, but what are your thoughts with the fact that because he is a celebrity, maybe they're not going to let him off this easy in this particular circumstance?
That's it. I mean, I like the new DA, he came in and immediately held his ground on reform. Got rid of all.
Gascon, and for the audience that doesn't know, the DA, yes, he's huge on reform. He's huge of not keeping people sitting in prison forever. His name is DA Gascon, so it's kind of controversial because of that, because he's very big on reform.
Yeah, he's being sued by some of the more conservative prosecutors in that office because he did away with the enhancements. And anybody that has practiced out there in LA, I mean, that's what drives up your sentence. He'll get his day in court in LA. You're going to get a diverse jury, and he'll get a jury of his peers, and that's one of the better places to try cases. It's like Shelby County. I mean, we'll get at least a 50-50 jury out here, and you'll get your fair shot. Unlike, some places in Nevada or Oklahoma, like we talked about, where you don't get a jury of your peers or people that look like you and I. So I think it'll play out. I think it'll.
But what's interesting, there's really only I mean, it's almost the victim's word against his, that the gun was discharged. So, I mean, obviously there's that. There are not a lot of witnesses to what happened. So there's some reasonable doubt there. And he wasn't the only one. It was him and a couple of other people. So you could argue that even if a gun went off, it wasn't necessarily his gun. And then I think the only thing that he does have going for him is that obviously the person wasn't killed and the person wasn't seriously injured. But to the point of DA Gascon, discharging a weapon in public, that's still something serious.
Hey,
So
look,
that's why they decided to move
they
forward.
don't play in California with guns.
Yeah, even if no one's hurt, if you discharge a
New York
weapon in a public
Right.
space, you got to get something. They're not going to just say, oh, nobody was really hurt. Okay, everybody go about their day. And I think at some level, maybe he thought because maybe the person wasn't really hurt, it was taking a while for the charges to come, that maybe this would go away. But yeah, as of yesterday, he's been officially charged. So that's a case that we're going to continue to follow. I wanted to close out though with going back briefly to lyrics. This guy, again, isn't famous. Honor roll high school student getting ready to go to college. I guess was present at the scene of a murder in Oklahoma, where Julius Jones is actually serving his life sentence right now. And long story short, this petition has been going around. And in fact, I just learned about this case yesterday. A petition has been going around asking people to help him. His name is, last name is Kristen. I want to make sure I get the right name here. Joshua Kristen. So he's in Oklahoma. Again, no previous record, anything like that. He's arrested. He's, charged. The way they present the evidence, the strongest evidence is that A, he was there. But B, there were some lyrics found in a container in his home. And they used both the lyrics and the fact that he was present. I guess the lyrics to twist to show intent, that he wanted to maybe harm the person, along with him just being there to get a conviction. And so he's currently, fighting this. He has an attorney. He's looking for a GoFundMe. I will put it in the link to his GoFundMe and the petition and the link of the show. But yeah, what are your thoughts on, someone literally having no criminal history, honor roll student getting ready to go to college, and literally it's like you wake up and your life has done a complete, 180. You're sitting in jail for murder, first degree, not second degree, murder. I feel for him and his family.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it goes back to sort of the theme of today's topic in conversation between you and I, is that we still have a long way to go, and we still have a lot of inequities in our system. And so I hope the Court of Appeals in Oklahoma or the Supreme Court rights the wrong, if there is a wrong in that case. Mm-hmm. And I wish he and his family well, and send prayers out to them, because we just see this over and over again as it relates to our people. Yes. I mean, and I always tell people, if he were a young white man or a young white student that was an honor roll student and going to college, would he have received the same treatment? And I think even you and I have colleagues that are white, and when we have those conversations, they know what the answer is. We all do. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where this all starts. And unfortunately, I mean, in Atlanta, you do have a DA's office that sort of reflects what the culture and population of Atlanta looks like. Mm-hmm. But in places like Shelby County, we still have a lot of work to do, where 88% of our prosecutors are non-African American, and we live in a city where you've been to Chocolate City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm from DC originally.
Yeah, so 67% of our population is African American. So, I think those are the type of things that you and I have to try to influence and effectuate change in those areas, because would an African American prosecutor handling that case look at this and say, oh, these are just lyrics that he was writing because he's messing around writing freestyle lyrics with his friends, or are these real lyrics, and were these intentional, and would he put his thoughts down on paper about trying to kill somebody? You know what I mean?
Right, for sure. Well, we're gonna, like I said, I just was alerted. I mean, because I have this podcast, I get alerted to get the word out about various, injustices going on. And so, I'm honored that people think to use me as a source to get the word out and to get support regarding these various cases. So we will be keeping our eye out for that. Why don't you just close out with some general advice you have for any kind of aspiring attorneys that are looking to do? I know you do criminal law, you do personal injury, you do a little bit of a lot, you do some entertainment law. So someone pursuing maybe, an interdisciplinary practice such as yourself, what is the best advice that you have for them?
I was fortunate, I guess, in that when I went out in private practice, I had only done really defense work. And so I had to kind of take on everything to keep my lights on. And so
They call it door law. Anything that comes to the door, you
right,
take it.
anything that came in the door. I mean, I was an expert.
I
was an
learned that
expert.
phrase a couple of weeks ago. I was like, what's door law? There's a popular YouTuber that taught me about what door law is. He's a lawyer on YouTube, so he talks
Oh,
about
yeah, they would bring in a DUI. I'm the DUI expert. They bring in a seizure case. I'm the expert on seizures. But what happened is over time is one, I figured out, what do I like to do?
Okay.
Number one. Two, what am I good at?
Okay.
And three, I like this, I'm good at this, so let me stay in my lane.
Okay.
Because the worst thing you can do, and you know this, and you've probably seen it. There was a lawyer here who any high profile case, anything that happened, even if it wasn't a cause of action, he'd jump on TV and he'd say, "I'm gonna help this family, and we're gonna fight for justice," and blah blah blah. And he would
He's
take
just trying to attach his name to anything that was running.
And he's a good lawyer, but he would take on all these cases even though there wasn't a cause of action. And eventually it cost him his law license because he would set the bar and expectations of people so high, knowing that he wasn't going to get them the result that they wanted. So it was a lesson to me in that, one, I'm gonna stay in my lane and do what I'm good at. And two, if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm gonna refer it to somebody that's competent and good. Because if the client gets the outcome, you're still gonna get the credit most of the time. Right? And I tell all my clients, I say, look, if I don't do it, call me and I will put you in the hands of someone that will take care of it. Because ultimately, that's one, how we help each other out in our profession, right? And number two, we help our people out because we know that we're going to put them in the hands of somebody that we trust, that's not going to take advantage of us. And so that would be my advice to aspiring lawyers and young lawyers is kind of figure out what you're good at, figure out what you like to do, and stay in your lane.
Now, just pray tell. So you figure, okay, I'm good at what? Talking? Good at, like, what did you feel like your skill set was? Like relating to people, like what, or being persuasive?
No, I mean, I feel like I was able to try cases. I feel like I'm great at trying cases.
Which is a skill set. Everybody doesn't have that skill set.
Correct. So, yeah. I like car wreck cases. I like criminal cases. I like federal cases. Medical malpractice is very, very specialized. And I work around, I'm in the office with lawyers that do a lot of medical malpractice. That's just not my lane.
Right.
Because one thing if you mess up one thing in a medical malpractice case, you're going to get sued. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know the ins and outs of it. You have to know the filing requirements. I mean, there's so much involved with medical malpractice cases. So if I get one, I refer it to guys that I trust.
Let there be a lesson. So you're not sued for malpractice. You don't have no bar complaint. Listen. One thing I will say as a lawyer, people think because you're a lawyer, automatically you know everything, right, you can fight everything. No, I have a specialty. Yeah, I'm going to law school. I learn all the general topics, but I haven't done this particular case. Maybe I've only done it once. That's not enough for me to be confident. It is okay to refer a case out. and especially in personal injury, you'll still get a percentage, you know? So,
Right,
so yeah, don't be
yeah.
afraid. Like you said, you know, something is not in your lane. It's just not in your lane. I think you will save yourself a lot of heartache, you know, in the future, having people being upset with you, like you said, setting that bar too high. So I think that's a great piece of advice, you know, figure out like what you like, what you're good at. And then once you do that, just staying in your lane. And you know, I think that is a great piece of advice, no matter what type of law you're doing, no matter whether you're big law, government, in council. I think what you just said applies to any area of law. So I will also continue to take that in my own personal legal journey to stay in my lane. We wanted to close out with our Black Excellence Moment of the Week, since we're staying on, you know, the topic of rappers and rap lyrics and things like that, and the state of rappers in the country as it relates to the laws. T.I., the rapper from Georgia, actually received Georgia's Outstanding Citizen Award for community service. T.I., with his exceptional vocabulary, is a huge, actually, criminal justice reform advocate. And I would actually love to have him on the podcast, but he's done some exceptional community service and things in Georgia. And so he was recently awarded with their award for service. And so we just want to congratulate him. And again, he is an example to future generation of rappers in terms of, again, being you know, what is it, you can be of something but not, I don't know, what is the famous thing, like be of the world but not, I don't know what the
Not
phrase
part
is.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
like,
I applaud these guys for using their platform
yeah.
to better us. You know, Yo Gotti and Jay-Z sued Parchman Prison in Mississippi, and they're making major reforms and changes. And I applaud T.I. for using his platform to effectuate change. I mean, that's what we all hope to do, or to be able to do. So.
For sure. So we salute you today, T.I., for our Black Excellence Moment of the Week. And again, I just want to thank you, Art, for coming on, dropping so many jewels. What I love the most about these interviews, I learned stuff that I would have never thought, right? So if you had asked me yesterday, what sport did I play? Golf would have never been on the list. As soon as you said golf, I was like, okay, he's probably going to say football. He's probably going to say basketball. For you to say golf, I was like, golf. So I just love that I get to learn, you know, just things you just wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know. I learned so many just interesting facts when I interview various lawyers and advocates and politicians to come on. Like even Maxine Waters, she was a dancer.
Yeah,
you know, I didn't know that. So I get to learn really cool things. So I know you're very busy with, you know, your high profile cases and even just your regular law practice. And so I just, again, I'm honored that you came on the podcast. Love to have you back in the future, potentially on a panel with some other folks that do criminal justice reform. And like I said, all the cases that we talked about today, we will keep them in mind, keep all the various defendants in prayer, especially, you know, the ones that are obviously being treated, you know, unfairly. And so we appreciate your time today. And as always, we are rooting for everyone Black. Take care.